Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. Hope you're all having a good Monday. Hope you had a good weekend and a good week ahead. Fingers crossed, very much so. But let's dive in. Today I want to talk about the best damage dealers in the game for the Hydra clan boss. I'm going to give you my top 10. I do have 10 runners up as well, and there's probably more. There's probably some I've left off. Definitely be thinking about your favorite damage dealers for Hydra as we go into this video, and if I miss them, let me know in the comments below. It's certainly very possible. Without any further ado then, let's dive in. I'm going to start with my number one pick, and really there's no question here. Acrisia is the best damage dealer for Hydra. In fact, she probably does 2.5 to 3 times as much damage as the other damage dealers will do, roughly speaking. At least 2 times as much as even the second best, which is just crazy. Why is she so good? Well, basically because every single move is an enemy max HP move. On top of that, her AoE, which is a 3-turn cooldown enemy max HP hit, actually hits 2 times. Now, as you might know, for a lot of bosses, the Hydra included, enemy max HP damage is actually capped to a certain number. It can only do so much damage. So yeah, the point of having 2 hits is that she can actually hit the damage cap twice and therefore basically do double the damage that other enemy max HP damage dealers will do with their AoEs, which is pretty crazy. Same thing with their single target. Because it's a double hit, each hit can max out that damage cap and effectively do twice as much damage, which is so insane. On top of that, half damage from AoE attacks means that she's going to be very tanky. One thing I'll do as well is I'll give you a couple of artifact set recommendations here as we go through for one or two of the sets I consider to be the best. Obviously bearing in mind that it might depend on whether you have these sets or not. Like, we're going to mention Relentless for a lot of these champions. It's totally okay if you don't have Relentless. You can use like Reflex or Impulse or something else. I'll suggest substitutes too. With Acrisia, Relentless would be the best one to go for, and I think Reflex or Impulse would be okay substitutes. Relentless, extra turns, seeing as every single move does so much damage, just giving her as many turns as possible, I think is broadly speaking the way to go. I think, again, it's fine to run Reflex or Impulse and be trying to get back to her A2 as often as possible. That's okay, but I think Relentless is probably slightly better for her. In second spot is a new champion. Is he undead? No, wait, where is he? He's Ogren, that's right. Grizzle Iron Gut is my number 2 pick here. Grizzle, his damage really comes from this move. 3-turn cooldown, enemy max HP nuke, and he's void, like Acrisia is as well, so no weak hits. As you can see, compared to Acrisia, who's got enemy max HP on everything, he doesn't have that. What Grizzle does bring, though, is a lot of utility, right? He's bringing you an AoE provoke on a 3-turn cooldown with increased resistance, increased defense. His A2 is going to heal him, but it's also going to increase all ally buffs by 1 turn. His A1 will put out a bit of a shield. It's okay. He's got a nice little passive as well, which is kind of useful, right? He won't kill himself against reflect damage with his max HP nuke if a reflect damage does sneak through. So I think Grizzle is very, very strong. Look, I mean, 3-turn cooldown, AoE enemy max HP nuke. Honestly, Acrisia is really overpowered, right? This is probably as strong as stuff should be, where Acrisia should have come out like 1 or 2 years from now and like the death throes, like, right, let's just give you something totally ridiculous. But hey, it is what it is. For Grizzle, I think that Relentless is arguably good. I think there's a couple of ways to go, right? He's quite stat hungry. This is a big difference. With Acrisia, she just needs speed, crit rate, crit damage, really, and a bit of survivability. Grizzle will need that bit of survivability as well. He's got good base stats, of course. But you're going to want the speed, crit damage, and crit rate for this move, of course. But you're also going to want accuracy to land the provoke. And if you want to utilize increased resistance, you're going to want resistance on him. Starts to get very, very stat intensive. So that's an option. You could just use stat gear to try to get that. That's okay. You could possibly ignore increased resistance and then be able to put him in a 4-piece set if you're lacking gear to use that more. So Relentless could be good to just cycle through his moves as often as possible, because both of these moves are so good. Just going in with Relentless and trying to cycle through them as quickly as possible is great. Reflex could be okay. It just might break like the sort of synergy here where he puts out his buffs and then he extends them on the second turn. It might break that synergy, so that's something to consider. I think the new Cursed set is actually really worth mentioning here. Cursed is now extremely good. I think it's from Ice Golem, right? Yeah, cursed, right? 50% chance to place Hex for 2 turns. This is very strong in Grizzle because every single attack is AoE. He's going to actually be able to get that curse, that Hex up very, very frequently. And I think you want probably only one champion in a Hydra team with cursed set, but I think this is definitely, for this video looking to the future, is definitely the way to go in Hydra. Having one champion with cursed is going to give you so much more damage, and champion with all AoEs like Grizzle is a perfect candidate to carry that cursed set. In position number 3 is Michinaki. I just did a video on him recently. This is a champion. We just mentioned curse set. It is possible that Michinaki might fall down this tier list a little bit, this ranking a little bit, once curse set becomes more ubiquitous, because part of the thing that makes him so good is that he does bring Hex. Now, he's going to be more reliable at bringing Hex than a curse set will be. Actually, kind of equal. He can weak hit due to affinity, whereas curse set should place regardless of affinity and weak hits. I think most sets do that, right? But yeah, Michinaki is very good. That being said, like I said, curse set could make it slightly less valuable. Of course, it does mean that you wouldn't need to bring a curse set, and that might be a bit of a weakness. I'm just thinking like a year from now, when you've hopefully built up a good chunk of cursed, will Michinaki be as good? He's still going to be very good, there's no doubt, right? The buff strip with the Hex, that's really nice. Decrease defense and decrease attack. And then he brings in some burns as well. He gets a lot of damage from this passive. 50% chance to join in any ally's attack against an enemy under Hex, apart from exposed Hydra necks. Yeah, it's just great. It adds up to a lot of extra damage, a lot of extra War Master damage, putting out those burns, making them more consistent. All this stuff adds up. And yeah, he's a great champion. Not going to do as much damage as an Acrisia, right? But he brings so much utility. Decrease defense, decrease attack. They're probably the 2 most essential buffs, or debuffs, I should say, to bring to Hydra, alongside decreased speed and block buffs. They're probably the most important ones. The fact he brings them both, really, really nice. 4 sets, I like him the most in Provoke set. I think that's quite nice because he's got these 2-3 turn cooldown AoEs. I can give you extra coverage of Provoke if you don't need that. Relentless is pretty all right too. That's going to help you keep the buffs up, the debuffs up, I should say, more consistently when he is weak affinity, right? Because he can weak hit and then he's not going to be placing these debuffs. Having him in Relentless will make that a little bit more consistent, which is sort of a luxury, I think, for Michinaki. But it is worth noting, and we're talking about the best sets here, so it is the best. Again, you might want to be saving your Relentless or your Provoke for like even more specific champions, but that is what I'd be putting on him. In number 4 position then, these 4 champions I think sort of stand above the others right now as the best ones. Supreme Glaive has to come in for me as number 4. A very recent champion as well, much like Grizzle. Supreme Glaive comes in with a 3-turn cooldown when booked, AoE with HP burn, block buffs, and even potentially decrease speed. Like, that is such a strong move. We talked about block buffs and decrease speed being the 2 really essential things, alongside decreased defense and decreased attack for Head of Wrath specifically. That is so good. He also explodes the burns and gives himself increased attack with his A2, and he can extend burns with his A1. His A1's not great. He's got a nice little passive as well to break free of like fears or provokes, which is pretty good with healing an extra turn. I would say Supreme Glaive is going to be a really, really good one to put Relentless set on, right? He's not super consistent with decrease. It's consistent, but not always going to happen with the decreased speed. So getting Relentless, getting back to this is going to be really good. And especially with block buffs, this is a debuff. It's pretty much the debuff for me that I'm like, Relentless set goes on this debuff. On my Ugos, Archbishop Pinthroy, Supreme Glaive, whoever it is you're using for block buffs, just to have that be as consistent as possible, have it out as much as possible, so that if a cleanse comes through, a new head spawns in, that you're doing as much as you can to get back to this quickly. It's what I would do. Also, because he gives himself increased attack, he can be targeted by Head of Mischief if you don't have increased attack elsewhere in your team. So Relentless can help him outrun his other buffs, and therefore prevent him from being targeted by Mischief as much. That's something you do need to consider. But yeah, Supreme Glaive, very good. Now we go into, I've separated then the next 6 into 3 and 3. I think you'll see pretty clearly why. I'm going to put, it's from this point on for me, it does become quite difficult to rank them. Honestly, it's very difficult. They all sort of blur together much, much more. Whereas I think those top 4 kind of stand above the rest at the moment. I'm going to put Sisia at number 5. This might be controversial, and that's okay. Like I said, feel free to move these around if you want. I think Sisia is just really nice. She brings in the AoE HP burn with potentially an extra turn, though again with affinity and weak hitting, not always going to happen. Then she also has an AoE that puts out weaken. It can put out decreased defense if there's 2 enemies under HP burn, and then it instantly activates any HP burn debuffs that are out there as well. So this really enables you to get all of that juicy damage out of the HP burns, like you're outrunning the Hydra, which hopefully you are doing, and you're getting extra burns out, you're exploding them and still getting the value. Same thing with Supreme Galek, it helps you get the value out of those burns, which is great. And bringing decreased defense and weaken is fantastic utility as well. I'd say the best sets for Sisia, I think maybe Reflex. I might look towards Reflex more on Sisia. She is quite squishy, right? So that's something to consider if you can get a good Reflex set on her. I think because she gets an extra turn off Firestorm right semi-frequently anyway, I think Reflex gets a bit more value compared to Relentless, but Relentless is really good too, where you could just run her in sets for stats or sets to keep her alive, whatever you need to do. I would say Reflex is probably the best. She'd be a decent one for Cursed as well, though it is a 4-turn and a 3-turn cooldown, and if she's the only burner, she probably does this move first priority. So it kind of forces them both into more like 4-turn cooldowns, because Flame Eruption will come off cooldown at the same time as Firestorm right. You're going to waste 1 turn if she has to do this move first. So there are things to consider. But yeah, look, anyway, enough about Sisia. She's really, really good. Next up, a new champion that all of you hopefully will have. Something's gone horribly wrong with your logging in recently, but Artak. I actually think Artak is fantastic. I'm putting him number 6 on this loose tier list here. I think he's so good, right? He comes in with a double hitter that puts out HP burn, even will restore his destroyed HP. Restoring destroyed HP isn't actually super useful because he does get extra speed when that HP is destroyed, which is really nice for Hydra. His A2 is an AoE that activates HP burns before attacking, so you don't need to worry about weak hits on this move, though you do on this one. And then he'll put out decreased attack as well, which is great. His A1 also an AoE that can extend HP burns, so kind of like Grizzle, every attack is an AoE, which is really nice. Again, I would not be massive fan of Reflex on Artak just because you know, you need to do the A3 before the A2. If you get those desynced, there's not going to be HP burns up and it's going to waste the move and it's going to go kind of badly. So for Artak, Relentless is a good option just for damage, right? Just getting as many turns as possible. Because he's putting out burns for 2 turns and then he explodes them by a turn, often you don't get the value of extending potentially with his A1, but you can more so if you do run him in Relentless, so that's nice. I also think he's very good in a provoke set, right? Every attack being an AoE, and he gets decent speed right here from his passive, so he's a good one to put into provoke set. He's also going to be really good in the cursed set as well. Again, every attack is an AoE, every attack 50% chance on every enemy to be placing that hex. That's going to really up your damage. Like again, because everyone has this champion, if you get a good cursed set and you get it on this guy, you're going to see him do so much damage in Hydra, it's not even going to be funny. It's going to be really, really strong. Next up then, we've got actually a duo. I'm sort of cheating, but we've got a duo. So they do, well, they don't need to be run as a duo. You can run Venus on her own. Cupidus, I would say, though, he definitely would want to be run in the duo. Why is Cupidus so good? He does have an AoE burn as well, common theme, but AoE A1, that does more damage if the target has debuffs. But with his passive, he does 25% more damage and always counterattacks when attacked if Venus is on the same team. All of these AoE counterattacks will really add up to a lot of damage against the Hydra. On top of the burns, he can provide his own increased attack as well, which can be useful too. Yeah, Cupidus, he's just going to do a lot of damage. And first champion on this list, I'd be running him in some variant of Savage, so like Savage or Lethal or Instinct or something like that, just to make him hit as hard as possible, right? Trying to maximize the value of these counterattacks. You know, Savage is going to make these hit harder if you run him with, I don't actually know off the top of my head if you run him with War Master or Helm Smasher. I'm not sure which does more, but both synergize very well with, like, Savage makes stacks really well with Helm Smasher, the ignore defense. Savage is going to make War Master hit harder too, so both will do well. It's probably going to depend on the level of your gear as to which you run him in. So there you are. Again, I would say Savage is likely to be the way to go. Venus then up next, his partner. AoE, decreased defense, weaken. Such a good move. Void Affinity as well. Then she also has a 4-turn cooldown AoE with burns. Her A1 could do poisons. She has this extra move where she can remove buffs from enemies and potentially get an extra turn with Cupidus on the same team. It's not as important to run her with Cupidus. She's totally viable, really good, in fact, even without Cupidus. But you obviously want to run her if you were running Cupidus as well. With Venus, I would say probably Cursed set stands out to me as being pretty good. She's bringing so many good debuffs. And you'd be priority 1 on this 3-turn AoE with an extra AoE to weave in. I think that's going to be quite nice. So that's what I do. I have seen some people run Provoke on her. I think that's okay. One thing I'd be worried about is, you know, if you're targeting the Head of Decay, like maybe you're manually selecting that target for her. Because she does put out poisons, like you could fill up the debuff bar and that could get kind of bad and you couldn't provoke him then if you're relying on that. So that's just something to watch out for. But I'd say Cursed is probably looking like the best one for her now. Part of why I wanted to do this video is because of how Cursed is probably shaking things up. Unfortunately, I don't have any Cursed gear to do a video on it myself and show you in person. But next up, we've got Geomancer. Great champion. Again, so these are the final 3 picks, guys, and you probably can guess what the final 3 are going to be. They all have one thing in common. Epic, in this case, Geomancer, he's coming in. He has the single target burn with weaken. What makes this so strong, it reduces the damage everyone receives, deflects it back. So that's really nice. But also this deflected damage can proc damage equal to 3% of the target's max HP. It's sort of the theme across nearly all of these champions, except for Cupidus. He's the one exception where nearly all of their damage is coming or broadly comes from max HP damage, right? Through burns or enemy max HP hits. That's where it's coming from. So Geomancer brings some burn damage, and he also brings, again, enemy max HP damage with that reflect kicking in. You tend to turn off his A2. It's useful on manual, but you wouldn't leave it on full auto. Just let him do his A1 and proc War Master AoE. I think that Geomancer probably works best in reflex. Save your Relentless for other people. Their Relentless is good as well. Like, he's not crazy tanky. Though his passive does help him stay alive, of course. But yeah, I think Reflex is pretty good, just getting back to his A3 as often as possible. Since you're turning off his A2, all of the Reflex procs will be focused into this. So that tends to work pretty well. Next up then, we have Royal Guard in position number 9. I do think Royal Guard is slightly better than Husk overall, just because he's more full auto friendly, which is something I value. But honestly, they're very interchangeable. Like I said, a lot of these champions are actually pretty interchangeable on the tier list. Royal Guard, he comes in with the AoE enemy max HP on the 4-turn. So you can see, compared to Grizzle, compared to Acrisia, we're definitely a big step down, but this is still really good. He also brings the 4-hitter that can put decreased speed, and he can decrease defense on his A1. Because of that, I think Relentless is probably the best way to build Royal Guard. It's going to be a bit tricky to keep him alive because you're going to want good speed, crit rate, crit damage, and then accuracy to land the decreased speed. It's actually quite nice to bring in as a supplement, and the decreased defense are nice supplements to bring in for your team. But yeah, just cycling through all of his turns, using all of these moves, getting all those debuffs and enemy max HP out is probably the best way to go. So Relentless would be probably the ideal set for Royal Guard. And then finally, we have Husk. Mentioned him already. He's sort of the Force Affinity version. I'm in the wrong faction. I think I do that every single time. He does look fairly demon spawny, to be fair. But Husky comes in, AoE, enemy max HP hit, but he's Force Affinity. Which one actually ends up being best, to be honest, often comes down to the affinities of the particular Hydra heads in the rotation. The difference with Husk, a big difference, is that his A3 isn't very useful for Hydra. You tend to turn this off, but his A1 has a 40% chance of provoke, which is actually quite nice because it can be quite difficult to get provokes into your team. So especially if you're going to manual or semi-manual, where you like click the head for them to target, if you can get him firing those A1s into the Head of Decay, that can be sort of key to actually getting your provokes out and making that work. So it sort of depends, right? If you're going to be using him and relying on this provoke, Relentless set is definitely the way to go, just to try get as many turns as possible, as many chances for this provoke. If you're just running him in full auto and you don't really care about the provoke, Reflex is probably really good because you can turn off his A3 and just let the Reflex keep cooling down this move, And yeah, that could be a nice way to run it as well. So there you go, guys. Boom. This was the list, as it were. My sort of top 10. We've got, I think these 4 really stand out as being insane. Then 3 extremely good legendary options as well. And then 3 good epic options. I did have some honorable mentions like Taras, Trunda, Tila. Like a lot I'll just mention briefly, but you know, Taras, it just hits extremely hard and extends your buffs. Trunda, she is completely broken. You probably just watch Scratch's runs from the Deadwood Jedi Hydra content creator Clash to see Trunda in action. Scratch had used Taras, and so did MTG Jedi. Tila's really nice as well. AoE burns with some healing and also an AoE hex. So she's a bit like Michinaki, but not as good, but a bit like him. Turvold, brilliant single target damage. Mashald, he does brilliant AoE, like pseudo AoE damage with his A1 and brings increased speed. Shamail, amazing. I used him on my Hydra Clash team. Does okay damage for sure, but the bigger thing is that he makes the Head of Torment just a non-issue, actually a positive thing. So that's really useful. Walking Tomb Drang, I think really underrated. That previous fusion, irresistible burns and nice healing for your team is really, really good. Tunisia, Void Affinity, again with burns and I think decreased speed. Solus, Void Affinity. Provoker, that also does good damage and extends debuffs. That's very useful. And then I put Razelvarg in here as well. I've been pretty impressed with him as just going really fast, putting out good damage. He can, you could put him in provoke set. He'd be pretty good for provoking. You could put him in curse set. You could put him in damage set. You could do some fun things. I think Razelvarg's actually pretty decent. So yeah, let me know. I mean, that's the one people might debate a little bit, but I think that's fairly okay. There you are. They are my top 10 or well top 20 I guess Hydra damage dealers. Let me know if I've missed any. Like I think here we can sort of see it in action, particularly with the 2 Acrisias. Yeah, it's just another level really. So interesting there. You could see who knows exactly how good the gear is on these particular champs, but one is in Relentless and one is in Savage. You can see they're pretty close in terms of damage. The Relentless is a little bit better. But yeah, I thought it was kind of fun as well to give you some gear set recommendations here for this video. Again, like you can see Michinaki, he's just in random sets really, and that's okay. Again, same thing here, giving you gear recommendations in this video, but that's sort of ideal scenario. Yeah, that's it. That's all I gotta say. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.